Welcome everyone to the part 2 of the origins of Xmas / Saturnalia, and we are now going to give you some verses talking about more about these two people that are included with the celebration. And actually, I've done some research recently. The whole idea of the rebirth of the sun deity is because Easter, which comes from the wife of Nimrod, actually is about 9 months before this. So, and actually, basically, okay, my volume's low. Shouldn't be low. All right, let me see here.
Sounds fine to me.
Yeah, okay, maybe there was some, yeah, it's 100% on my computer. All right, anyway, basically, the Saturnalia would have been 9 months later after the actual original Ishtar Day, Easter. So, and basically it would have been the birth of the Queen of Heaven, basically. The Queen of Heaven, known in Jeremiah 7, Semiramis, would have been given birth to Horus on December 25th. So, and December 25th, historically, is also the birthday of Mithra, the Iranian deity, of light. So we're going to get to that, but first I got some other cross references real quick I want to get to, especially in the book of Mark. Mark chapter 7, verse 9, I think we're going to start with, because this talks about making Yahuwah's commandment void through vain traditions. So this is very important here. Says in Mark chapter 7, verse 9, says, "And he said unto them, Full well you reject the commandment of Yahuwah, that you may keep your own tradition." That's the restored name King James there.
And starting 6 and 7 and 8, you might as well read it all.
Yeah, actually, yeah, let's go up to 6. "He answered and said unto them, Well has Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, These people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teach for doctrines the commandments of men." Now in the Masoretic text, you might get confused because you try to go to Isaiah 29:13, and it's not going to read exactly that way in the Masoretic text. So this is where having a Septuagint helps. Because what he just said right there, Isaiah verbatimly says that in the Septuagint of Isaiah chapter 29:13. So that's something you might want to check out. So basically, he's talking about, you worship me, and basically how then in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men, for laying aside the commandment of Yahuwah, you hold the tradition of men as the washing of pots and cups and many other such like things you do. So basically, these vain traditions, they are substituting Yahuwah's Torah with these vain traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, basically, they would literally say you're sinning if you don't ceremoniously wash these pots and pans, and stuff like that. Or if you eat food with hands that are not washed. So,
wash your hands a certain way in Judaism.
And then
3 drops off the elbow.
Then he reiterates by saying, right again, and he said unto them, Full well you reject the commandment of Yahuwah, that you may keep your own tradition. So again, this can even be applied to Nimrod. And the reason I brought this up is this can be applied to Saturnalia. And basically what Christianity keeps a lot of things that are against Yahuwah's word, but they keep their tradition instead of keeping his word. So
yeah.
If you go to verse 13, it says, "Making the word of Yahuwah of none effect through your tradition, which you have delivered, and many such like things you do." So you're making his word void by doing these traditions that are completely against his word. So that's the point of why I brought up Mark chapter 7.
And what makes it so bad is they claim to worship him in that way of paganism. And it has nothing to do with our true creator. Nothing to do with the Messiah.
Yep, and
It was not Messiah's birth on December 25th.
no, most
fall,
yeah, most people know that. Even most astronomers have figured that out by now. Most of them know just by the signs of Revelations 12 of the constellations and all that when he could have been born. And it was nowhere near December. So
no.
Let's see here. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 5. Now we're going to be dealing with the actually two people that Nimrod myths and Easter are actually about, and our people are worshiping unknowingly. Here we go. We're going to go 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 5. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Now, most likely Milcom would have been Raphan, Saturn, whatever name you want to give him. Most likely it's Nimrod that's referring to here, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon, unfortunately, he had pagan wives. That's what happens when you have pagan wives. They lead you to do stuff you shouldn't be doing. And he had an Egyptian wife, an Edomite wife. He had so many different,
He had
wives.
1,000 of them.
So he had 1,000 women. I think the actual in scripture says he had 700 wives, 400 concubines. So in total, 200. Okay.
300.
300
concubines and 700 wives makes 1,000.
Yeah, so he had 1,000 women. Unfortunately, that's what led him down this path. So 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 5 shows you that he started worshiping Nimrod and his mother/wife. And then here you go. You have Jeremiah 19, verse 5. They have built also the high places of Baal, Nimrod, to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal, which I commanded not, nor spake it, neither it came into my mind. So basically now, all of a sudden in the book of Jeremiah, you have Yahuwah constantly bringing up to mind that his people would constantly idolize this other guy and his wife. And so there's tons of places that I'm going to be reading from here where it shows that they constantly were doing this. Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 35. And they built the high places of Baal, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, or Ben Hinnom, which is actually where I believe Gehenna, the actual valley of Gehenna would have been in Yashrael. That's where they get the idea of Gehenna from. To cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire unto Molech, which I commanded them not, neither it came into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Yehuda to sin. So again, and you can actually find Molech today, modernly being worshipped by celebrities and the Illuminists, the Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove, absolutely.
So they have the Molech owl statue where they do quote-unquote mock sacrifices, so they claim it's not real, that they don't do real sacrifices. But anyway, the fact of the matter is they have an image, a huge dang image of Molech there. So, and then if you go to Psalms chapter 106, verse 28, it says, they joined themselves also unto Baal Peor, or Baal of Peor, meaning basically the people of Peor were worshiping Nimrod, and the Yashraelites joined themselves, these people, and started worshiping Baal, and ate the sacrifices of the dead. So this is where you get in Revelations how it talks about Jezebel and all that. It talks about she put a stumbling block before Yashrael to eat food sacrificed to idols, where, well, in Psalms, this is given a second basically witness to this, that it actually happened. So they started eating the sacrifices of the dead. Basically, the pagans would sacrifice animals and all that to dead people. and the worship of the dead, which you can actually find in the Vatican. Maybe not literally like this, but they'll worship the saints. It's practically the same thing. So that's kind of carried over to Catholicism in a way. Numbers chapter 25, verse 3, and Yashrael joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of Yahuwah has kindled against Yashrael. So again, they joined themselves to Baal Peor. That is actually the story where Phineas takes the spear and starts slaughtering all of the Yashraelite men that joined themselves to the pagan women. And because they joined themselves to pagan women, they were worshiping Baal. So Phineas was one of the few Yashraelites that actually had a zeal for Yahuwah, and actually it's said by him killing the men that actually joined themselves to these pagan women that Yahuwah's fire was not kindled anymore against them. So Phineas actually, kind of basically spared his brothers by doing that. So Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 3 says, your eyes have seen what Yahuwah did against Baal Peor. For all the men that followed Baal Peor, Yahuwah thy Elohim has destroyed them from among you. So again, this is very important. I know a lot of people say, he knows my heart and stuff. Well, Yahuwah knew these guys' hearts. I mean, it didn't matter. He still slaughtered all them that worship Baal. So I'm just saying. So the book of Judges, chapter 2, verse 13, which says, and they forsook Yahuwah and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Right there. So it tells you right there that they actually started worshiping Nimrod and his mother/wife right there. So, and then in Judges chapter 3, verse 7 says, now these are the nations which Yahuwah left to test Yashrael by them, even as many of Yashrael as has not known all the wars of Canaan. Now that's interesting. Oh, whoops, I'm reading the wrong verse. My bad. Judges chapter 3, verse 7. I meant to read verse 7. And the children of Yashrael did evil in the sight of Yahuwah and forgot Yahuwah, their Elohim, and served Baalim in the groves. So Baalim, I guess, is like plural for Baal. It's like probably multiple false deities. And the groves, again, the groves are where the dead is. That's where sacrifices to the dead would be. So you also have Judges chapter 10, verse 6. And the children of Yashrael did evil again in the sight of Yahuwah and served Baalim and Ashtaroth and the mighty ones of Syria and the mighty ones of Zidon and the mighty ones of Moab and the mighty ones of the children of Ammon and the mighty ones of the Philistines, and forsook Yahuwah and served not him. So now in Judges 10, they're not just serving, Baal and Ashtaroth. They're now serving like all these other deities. They're starting to become like Greek mythology, where they're serving a pantheon of deities. So unfortunately, they've corrupted themselves, and as you can see here, this is one of the main reasons Yahuwah divorced them, was because of all this idolatry. Judges chapter 2, verse 11 says, and the children of Yashrael did evil in the sight of Yahuwah and served Baalim again. So they served Baal again. They keep serving Baal so many times. Constantly. This was a constant problem with them. And
it's still going on.
Yep. The only difference is he's kind of gave himself a makeover, and Christians don't know they're serving him. They don't know that this Caesar Borgia that they've been programmed to idolize is actually Baal, and don't realize that. 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 3, and Samuel spake unto all the house of Yashrael, saying, if you do return unto Yahuwah with all your hearts, then put away the strange mighty ones and Ashtaroth from among you. So to me, that means, we need to be throwing away the reefs, Christmas trees, anything that has to do with foreign mighty ones. We should be throwing them away, according to 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 3. It even says, and prepare your hearts unto Yahuwah and serve him only. He will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. This was back in the days of King David and Samuel. So now we're going to go to chapter 12, verse 10. It says, so 1 Samuel chapter 12, verse 10. And they cried unto Yahuwah and said, we have transgressed because we have forsaken Yahuwah and have served Baal and Ashtaroth, but now deliver us out of the hand of our enemies, and we will serve you. So now that is the end of our cross references here. The one thing I did want to say about this particular verse is they acknowledged it. They knew what they were doing. That's the only difference between now and then and now. People are unknowingly doing this, unknowingly worshiping other mighty ones, and even worshiping Yahuwah like the nations worship their deities. That is the only difference. That is the only difference between the Israelites of old and Christians now and believers now, is that a lot of them don't know what they're doing. They don't know who they're serving, like it says in John chapter 4. They don't understand.
I believe in the two witnesses get here and begin to broadcast their message worldwide. The people will know clearly what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they will have a choice.
Yeah. Now I want to go to the archaeological part of this, which is very interesting. So, many ancient depictions of what we know as the Xmas tree. First, probably the earliest depiction of, if anyone has watched Ancient Aliens, they'll recognize this archaeology right here. This is would have been known in their quote-unquote mythology as the Anunnaki, also known in the biblical narrative as the sons of Anak, the Anakim. Notice how they're all depicted with the long beard and the turban. They're all depicted as Nimrod, all these guys there. So it's showing them with Xmas tree, and then it has the Assyrian deity Ashur, which is basically Nimrod with the inside a phoenix as the star of the Xmas tree back then. So the original Xmas tree did not have a star. It would have actually had this phoenix-looking Assyrian deity on the top of the tree. Now we're going to go to a couple other things I have here. Now, for also, you might want to take note of this. I have a quote from a Christian preacher from way back in the day. His name is C.H. Spurgeon. Now, this is a Christian saying this, mind you. Those who follow the custom of observing Christmas follow not the Bible, but pagan ceremonies. This is a Christian. So you might want to take notice of that. That's a Christian saying that. Okay, so I also
what was his name? C.H. what?
C.H. Spurgeon.
Spurgeon.
Yeah, spelled.
Good man.
Yeah, he probably had similar beliefs to the Puritans, which we are going to get to. I don't know if he was into Sabbath keeping, but I do know he was against the ceremonies of Rome and the Pope and all that. Now, this is the first depiction of your jolly old Santa Claus. Goes right back to Nimrod himself. Nimrod deified an ancient Nineveh artifact. So this is a picture of what the original Nineveh artifact would have looked like. You got the evergreen in his one hand, right here, the evergreen tree. And then you got in his other arm, Rudolph the reindeer. That's where he comes from, right there. So, and then you got wings. You got angel wings on a hybrid giant that is known as Nimrod. Would have been known as him in real life as Nimrod. This goes all the way back to circa 2000 BC. So before Yahushua came to earth, 2,000 years before he came to earth. So, yep. Wow, way back. Okay, so you got Saturnalia. This festival would have been known as Saturnalia in the neo-pagan Roman era. But it's also known in Buddhism as Sanghamita Day. And then in the Zuni culture, it would have been Shalakho. in the Iran, which Iran geographically is pretty close to Iraq, which was Babylon back in the day.
Well,
Anyway,
stop.
so you have Yalda in Iran, so very close to where he originally was. And then you have in ancient Rome, Brumalia, and in Asia you have Dong Zi Festival. And then in Slavic, a very weird name, or I don't even want to say it. No.
Orgasm. You move.
Yeah, that's a weird satanic. Harukan.
Orgasm.
So that was in the Slavic culture for anyone that wants to know. Now, I also have another ancient artifact right here. That is, you can find this in the 119 Ministries Sunburn series. Anyone that's interested, just a disclaimer: we don't agree everything with 119 Ministry teaches with the names they use for the Father and Son, but we do agree mostly with what their series talks about, the ancient pagan origins of December 25th. So you can actually find this in their documentary about the Sunburn series, basically it's called. And this is from the New Encyclopedia Britannica. So this is from a real legit source.
If you look right here, you see presents in their hands and going to bow before a tree.
Yep. And then it actually says right here, the December 25th, the birthday of Mithra, which Mithra would have been another name for Nimrod after the Tower of Babel. The Iranian, so Iran, we just talked about Iran with one of the other names for Saturnalia. The deity of light, okay? Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
What is Hanukkah, the festival of lights? Yeah, I wonder.
Lights.
Yeah.
And they're calling Hanukkah festival of lights. They're called Saturnalia, the same thing.
Yep, and it says the day devoted to the invincible sun. What's interesting, though, is December 25th was actually the day after Saturnalia, according to this resource. It says the day devoted to the invincible sun, which Sol Invictus by Constantine. We'll get to Constantine by the end of this study, as well as the day after Saturnalia was adopted by the Roman Catholic Church as Christmas. So December 25th originally was like an extra holiday actually after the whole weekly feast of Saturnalia, which goes from December 17th all the way to the 24th. And so basically this day would have been right after it. So Hanukkah probably comes from this day. That is the day after Saturnalia, most likely. And Christmas, basically, you know, the pagan Roman Empire basically merged paganism with the belief of Yahusha, and that's where you get Christianity. So Christianity is a hybrid religion that has a lot of paganism in it that most people are not aware of. So I think those are the two resources I wanted to use from here. Let me go to the next window. Here is a great resource that I really like. It's known as findmypast.com blog, and this is all about the history. Many people don't even know that Christmas was illegal until a certain point in America. So here we go. We're just going to read from this. Now, this is the actual public notice. This is a copy of what the public notice would have been back then, what it looked like in the 1600s. It says the public notice observation of Christmas has been deemed a sacrilege, meaning abomination. Anyone that doesn't know what a sacrilege is, a fancy Catholic term for abomination, basically. The exchanging of gifts and greetings, let's see, what does it say? Dressing in fine clothing, and let's see, there's something else. It's hard to read because it's so old, this thing. Satanic practices are hereby forbidden, and offender liable to a fine of 5 shillings. So this is back when, this was even before the so-called breaking free from Britain. This was like when America was still a colony of Britain. So this was the 1600s.
Yeah, 5 shillings was a lot of money back then.
It says, can you imagine receiving a a stiff fine for wishing someone a Merry Xmas sounds like something from a dystopian future imagined by those who annually complain about the war on Christmas. This scenario is actually from the 17th century Boston. Christmas was banned for over 2 decades in the 1600s. So that would have been at least 20 years. That's right, from 1659 until 1681, it was officially illegal to observe Christmas in Boston by taking the day off from work, feasting, or celebrating in any other way. Wow. Those in violation were fined 5 shillings, the exact contemporary value of which is debated by economic historians, but suffice it to say was an incredibly steep fine back then. So what gives 16th century Bostonians have historians since discovered that the hearts of these colonial so-called Grinches were 2 sizes too small? Or is there a more nuanced, fascinating historical explanation? Of course there is. So Xmas is so 200 BC, that's funny. Understanding the social and political climate in England and her colonies in the 1600s is key to figuring out why the heck Xmas got banned in the first place. At that time in history, the majority of the population of Boston was Puritan. Okay, so the Puritans hated the traditions of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, if you are a Protestant, this is something to pay attention to. If you are, you're actually evangelical, any type of denomination, you guys should really pay attention to this part. And constantly rallied against the Church of England for adopting any remotely Catholic practices. Now, the one thing I would say is, if they hated that so much, I would suffice to say maybe possibly these guys were keeping the Sabbath and other stuff in the Old Testament. If they hated Romanism so much. So the extremely conservative tenets of Puritanism yielded more than a few reasons for Bostonians to despise Christmas. It wasn't really the birthday of Yahusha. December 25th was only declared the birth of Yahusha by Pope Julius I in 4th century AD. Now, which basically is kind of weird to me because that means Constantine, if this is true, Constantine didn't even declare his birthday yet when he had people celebrating Saturnalia. So probably it was still Saturnalia and Constantine, because Constantine was around 300 AD. I think he was in 1st century AD, if I'm not mistaken. So
he was in the 3rd century.
The 3rd century, okay.
And part of the 4th.
Okay, so this is around the similar time. Okay. Since then,
just after Constantine.
All right, so many have debated the date of the actual birth of Yahusha with very little consensus, but either way, the Puritans were all about Scripture. According to them, there was nowhere in Scripture that said to celebrate December 25th as the birth of Yahusha, so they saw no need to. Xmas was too pagan. Not only was observation of Xmas left out of the biblical text, the date of December 25th was a decidedly blasphemous one. Julius I likely picked December 25th to hasten the adoption of the Christian holiday. It now coincided with an already widely celebrated Roman holiday, Saturnalia, a celebration filled with raucous parties and drunken misbehavior. Puritans were always quick and usually correct to highlight the pagan underpinnings of Catholicism. And then it says, partying was un-Puritan. Puritans had particular problems with wild behavior, including alcohol and gluttony. Conservatives in England and the colonies campaigned against Christmas tradition of wassailing, in which the lower classes would go door to door requesting food and drink from their wealthier counterparts in exchange for toasting their tube health. If refused, the host would suffer a great deal of mischief or even violence. Interestingly, this debate gave rise to Father Xmas in England. Proponents of Xmas merriment often invokes this personification who was a mild-mannered, cheery old man that had a tube, not tube time on the holidays. That's interesting. So again, they got a picture here, vindication of Xmas and all that. So pretty much it finally gets to the point where it wasn't even deemed an actual national holiday, like universally celebrated until 1800s. So it's a very late celebrated holiday, and most of the Bostonians, even in 1686, were still fighting it because a lot of them were still Puritan. So the Catholic Church did what the Jesuits did. Eventually, if you further on read this article, it talks about how the British put their own people in government to get Christmas to be celebrated. So pretty much what the Jesuits do with our government. They infiltrate. And so basically that's what happened. And it even says here, highlighted here, Bostonians wholeheartedly agreed with the ban and in fact relished working on Xmas Day. Basically, they wanted to work on Xmas Day because they didn't celebrate it. An act of defiance against meddling foreign governments and rival Christian sects. So basically the Bostonians, the Puritans, they never really wanted to celebrate it. So basically it was forced on them in the early 1800s, as it says down here. So you can read that for yourself. The last thing I want to go to is Encyclopedia Britannica. So we got here the influence of Saturnalia. You can look this up for yourself. Talks about the one thing I did want to say is even January 1st, Janus Day, is influenced by Saturnalia. So, okay, that didn't just influence the celebration of Christmas, but also what we know in this country as New Year's Eve. So, and that goes back to the pagan deity Janus. So I have two little clips I want to play real quick. This is a Christian televangelist that says it himself, the pagan origin. So just listen here. And here we go.
Celebrate Christmas because David, who says, we have friends who do not celebrate Christmas because they say December 25th is really a pagan holiday. While I agree that Jesus may not have been born on December 25th, he certainly was born as described in the Bible. How do I respond to them?
Well, in a sense, tell them they're right. You see, the winter solstice a couple of days later was the shortest day of the year, and the pagans had something called Saturnalia. And it was a time of lawlessness because all the laws were suspended. And people, a bunch of singers actually wandered the streets naked singing. And then they had orgies, sexual orgies. It was a mass thing. Well, when the Catholic Church came along in Italy, the Romans and others didn't want to give up their holidays. So they said, okay, we'll Christianize it. And so they said, okay, we'll say the birth of Jesus was the 25th of December. And then there was a monk who began to add it up. You see, if you read in Luke, it says there's a census taken when Quirinius was governor and so forth and so on. And they could take those leaders and figure the exact time dating from the foundation of Rome. And that's when the dates were established. And so they get pretty close to the date. But to say it's the 25th, shepherds were out abiding in the field. It gets a little cold at night. I mean, were they out there in the middle of winter? You know, I don't know. I've been out there on the shepherd's field on Christmas Eve. It's very nice. But it's cold. And nevertheless, I mean, what was going on? So all this business about mistletoe, pagan. Christmas trees, pagan. Giving out gifts, pagan. Every bit of it is pagan. Every single bit of it.
Yeah, I'm going to cut him off there because then he's going to start saying that it's okay to celebrate it, that they Christianized it. Nowhere in Scripture does it say it's okay to Christianize it, buddy. Nowhere.
No, he gave the truth, and then he was going to try to back himself out of it, but you can't back out of that.
Yeah, so everyone, what you just heard, that's a Christian guy letting you know the truth. He He's a well-known televangelist, and I just want to play a clip. This is a clip from The Big Bang Theory, a science secular show, and this is an atheist telling you why he doesn't celebrate Christmas. Listen closely.
Hey, Sheldon, are you and Leonard putting up a Christmas tree?
No, because we don't celebrate the ancient pagan festival of Saturnalia.
Saturnalia?
Gather round, kids. It's time.
And of course, you're going to notice here, they're going to try to make light of it, just warning people. They're going to try to make light of it like it's a joke, but he's about to give you the whole thing, just like Pat Robertson is. And this is an atheist character that the guy's playing.
For Sheldon's beloved Christmas special. In the pre-Christian era, as the winter solstice approached and the plants died, pagans brought evergreen boughs into their homes as an act of sympathetic magic intended to guard the life essences of the plants until spring. This custom was later appropriated by Northern Europeans, and eventually it becomes the so-called Christmas tree.
Notice how he says the so-called Christmas tree. So basically, it evolved into adoption of the Christmas tree. So obviously this whole tradition of under every green tree, the evergreen, was way before Christianity. So even a secular show like this. So I just wanted to put that in. We still have a couple minutes before our time is over. I would also encourage those to read Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, because this is where you get the actual prophecy of what Constantine actually did. He actually replaced the correct celebration of Yahusha's sacrifice for us, which is Passover. He replaced that with Easter in the Christian religion, and he did that on purpose. So he was like the actual original first pope, according to history. And so you have Daniel chapter 7, verse 23 says, let me see here. Let me make sure that's correct. See here. It says, oh, my bad. Verse 25, it says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the set apart ones of the Most High, and shall think to change times and laws. Now, this word times is actually supposed to be the appointed times, moedim, in the Hebrew. If you look in the Masoretic text, it will actually be appointed times. So he changed Passover to Easter, and he tried to replace the true Sabbath, Friday evening and Saturday evening, with the Nazarenes of that time, the Nazarene, with Sunday, to worship Sol Invictus, as we talked about in the earlier video.
Catholics are very proud of that.
So
they tell you can look in the Bible all the way from Genesis to Revelation and never see one scripture that will change the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday.
Yep. And
that's their doing only.
Yep. I just got one cross-reference left, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 4. We should be warn each other of not to accept another Messiah. So if he that comes preaches another Yahusha whom you have not preached, or if you have received another spirit or another Basora which you have not accepted, you might well bear with them. Basically meaning don't put up with another Basora, a false Basora, or a false Messiah, a false Yahusha. So
false teaching.
Yeah, basically, the true Yahusha taught the law of Yahuwah. He told us to keep the Father's commandments, his commandments. He even called the Father's commandments his commandments. So that's something we need to keep in well. And we got less than a minute. I'm about to we're going to do a part 3 just for commentary. Anyone that wants to, if